Years ago, Mount Everest was considered a mountaineer's mountain, where a climber need worry most about avalanches, hidden crevasses, and the potential to succumb to altitude mountain sickness. But now a new and ever-present danger exists. Something far more hazardous and life-threatening exists on the world's highest peak. Mount Everest is quickly becoming an extremely dangerous mountain because of overcrowding. By the end of this video, you're going to know just how dangerous Mount Everest has become and how one of the world's most famous mountains has gotten out of control. The first recorded deaths on Mount Everest took place in 1921 during the first of 3 British attempts on the north side. And then in 1922, 7 porters were killed in an avalanche below the North Pole. In all, over 330 individuals have lost their lives on the mountain, and over 200 of those bodies are still there on the mountain, most of them completely out of sight in crevasses or fallen deep down cliffs below, but a few of them are still visible as a reminder to Everest's deadly allure. In the years leading up to the first ascent by Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay in 1953, the mountain was mostly uncrowded. Some years, no teams would go at all in trying to attempt the summit. And even then, only the world's finest mountaineers would be on the mountain, fully trained in the art of climbing. Diving deeper into each period, the death rate from 1921 to 1999 was 1.8, meaning that out of every 100 people who attempted the mountain, up to 2 would die. When commercialism grew in the early 2000s, the death rate went down drastically to 0.8. Most of the traffic took place on the northeast or southeast ridges, led by Western guiding companies. It seemed that Mount Everest was getting safer now that all the logistics had been worked out and so much had been learned about high-altitude physiology. But today it's not like that. While the death rate declined in the early 2000s to less than 1 death per 100 climbers, the numbers are actually quite misleading because the number of climbers on the mountain drastically rose. And then, with most of the summit attempts happening in the month of May, it's vitally important that there's a good weather window for those attempts to be made. Let's consider that there might be 300 or 400 individuals ready to attempt the summit, waiting, sometimes impatiently, for a good day of weather to take place. And when that window finally comes, very often what happens is all those individuals head up the mountain at the same time, creating very dangerous, many times deadly traffic jams at the very tip top of the mountain. As statistics show, the main causes of death on the mountain are avalanches and falls, followed by altitude mountain sickness. Then exposure, then frostbite, followed by other causes, including disappearances, where the actual cause of death can never be determined. But in the last decade or so, the true danger on the mountain lurks in the number of people who are there to climb it, and the number of Sherpa support for each individual climber has also gone up drastically. In 2023, there was a record number of permits handed out to climbers from around the world endeavoring to climb the mountain. And now, considering that each of those climbers on average had sometimes 2 Sherpa with them, putting an extreme amount of pressure not only in base camp where all those people congregate, but high upon the mountain during those summit waves. More people, plus no regulations, plus anybody can climb that can pony up $12,000 for a permit, plus no guidelines on guiding companies, equals Everest's new greatest danger: the people. Need we look any further than the 2019 season, where climbers were waiting literally hours for their turn to stand on the top of the world? New York Times best-selling author Mark Sinnott, in his book The Third Pole: Mystery, Obsession, and Death on Everest, devoted an entire chapter to the 2019 debacle, and in that day where the traffic jam was made famous by these iconic photographs, Mark called that chapter "The Day That Everest Broke." A heartbreaking story is that of Donald Cash, a Utah climber who reached the 7 summits. He died on Mount Everest during that traffic jam. Shortly after he reached the summit, he fainted due to high-altitude sickness, and the guide company Pioneer Adventure wrote that they tried to make it back down after he regained consciousness, but there was such a huge line that they had to wait literally hours to move just a few feet, and Cash succumbed and was left where he died, very near the Hillary Step. His body is still there today. A devastating story that is unfortunately becoming more and more true as the years go on and the number of climbers go up. With Donald Cash's body still at the Hillary Step in clear view, it's a perilous reminder of what could happen if somebody gets in trouble up there and needs to get down quickly, then ultimately get stuck in a traffic jam. It is just literally the most dangerous place in the world to have traffic moving slowly. The area above 8,000 meters is called the death zone, and for a darn good reason. You should only go in there for the absolute minimum amount of time and get the heck out. Donald Cash, unfortunately, looked to have had a fairly good possibility to survive, and the Sherpas that were with him tried valiantly to save him, giving him extra oxygen, but the hours that they were stuck up there proved too much for Don Cash. On this very channel, I've talked to people about the impact of what it's like to see a dead body on the mountain. Most recently, my interview with 19-year-old Ryan Mitchell, who spoke about seeing 2 individuals in place where they had died on the day that he went to the summit. And he spoke about it and how it impacted him and how it was shocking to actually see them. And on Ryan Mitchell's own video, he puts a black box over that body. There are others who are far more traumatized by it, and so what it really does is it brings up the question, should the bodies be taken away to keep them out of view, or should the very few bodies on the mountain that are visible? Now, I just want everybody to know that of the 200 bodies, most are not ever going to be seen. They're either buried into crevasses or have fallen deep down cliffs many thousands of feet and meters away. But should those who die in a certain place, if it's the wishes of the family and loved ones to leave them where they are, gruesome as it is, does this provide an ample motivation to keep people away from coming to Mount Everest? And year after year, whenever some disasters take place, most notably, I suppose, in 1996, not only did the number of deaths not dissuade people from returning to the mountain, but the numbers skyrocketed almost because of it. So there is some sort of fascination with people to go and risk it all in order to get to the top of the mountain. On a final note about Don Cash, his son, Tanner Cash, had been interviewed shortly after his death in 2019 by an American television program, and Tanner said that the last message he sent to me personally was, quote, "I'm so blessed to be on the mountain I have read about for 40 years. His family wanted him to be remembered as a person who pushed the limits to chase his dreams and to explore the world. And his daughter, Brandolyn Cash, said, "I think there's just so much peace that comes from knowing that he didn't suffer, that it was the best way to go." Amazing. A lot of insight for a family who, when quoted on this, were just going through the deep trauma of having lost their dad. Another fateful tale took place in 2024 during a traffic jam when a climber named Daniel Paterson and his climbing Sherpa, Tenji Sherpa, were standing on a cornice very close to the Hillary Step when that cornice collapsed and tumbled down the Kangshung face. They were never seen again. They fell thousands of meters below. 4 climbers were attached to the rope at the time, and managed to get themselves back up onto the ridge. A guide that was climbing there that day before the accident took place, Vinayak Jaya Malla, he was with a client. Malla has several summits to his name, and he wrote that the Everest summit ridge felt different than on his previous experiences on the mountain. He said that there was soft snow, many cornices and rocky sections were covered in snow, and after summiting, they crossed down the Hillary Step, said traffic was moving slowly, which you can see from this video. People are pretty much at a standstill, and as it would turn out, after Malla turned his camera off, this is when the cornice collapsed, but shortly after, he turned his camera back on. That shows a climber and then someone behind that climber struggling to get back up. Now, when one looks at a shot of the Kangshung face from the Tibetan side of the mountain, you can see that anything that falls off of that ridge is going to go thousands of meters below. And sadly, Daniel Paterson and Tenji Sherpa were never seen again. Malla says that many climbers were stuck in the traffic, people's oxygen running low, and what he did was he started breaking a new route for the descending traffic so they could slowly move once again and get down to safety. In a post on Reddit, a climber there, Rajan Dvivedi, says that he was coming down from the summit, saw many climbers in quite a precarious situation, hanging on the rope, and their Sherpas struggling to pull them or convincing them to climb down on their own. These Sherpas, he said, looked helpless. Many were not responding and in a sleepy zombie state. Just goes to show you how difficult it is to do anything, even just for yourself, just to put one foot in front of the other in the death zone, especially after having gone to the summit, where it takes almost all of your energy just to get there. And in this Reddit post, he mentions that he saw 4 dead bodies. 2 were from this year. That, quote, impacted me emotionally and reminded me to get down the mountain quickly. Continues saying, mountaineering on Everest gave me mixed feelings. Shortly after that, well, almost immediately after news of Daniel Paterson's death reached the States, his partner, Rebecca Woodhead, she started a GoFundMe page to fund more search and rescue missions for, as what she said, was the beloved son, brother, partner, and friend, Daniel Paterson, and his climbing Sherpa, Tenji. And her goal was to raise about 150,000 pounds. And ultimately, shortly before they shut that GoFundMe page down, apparently it had reached 300,000, at least US dollars. But that GoFundMe page came down not a long time afterward, because the logistics of searching on the Tibetan side are significant, primarily because there are just not as many, there are almost no helicopter flights whatsoever on the Tibetan side. And that's one thing that climbers going to climb Everest on the Tibetan side are well aware of, that helicopters are not allowed just to fly up to base camp. So unfortunately, because of the literal impossibility of there being any helicopter search opportunities, they shut the GoFundMe page down, and all that money has been returned to the donors, which is another sad, sad story about Everest. You are really out on the line because of the great numbers. Again, we are learning time and again that overcrowding, the other people, are becoming by far the most dangerous aspect of climbing Mount Everest. So what can be done? Are climbers wanting to stand on the highest mountain in the planet doomed to suffer the same fate of those who died while stuck in traffic jams like Don Cash, or because of cornices breaking under the weight of too many climbers on the summit ridge like Daniel Paterson and Tenji Sherpa? Well, firstly, it's highly unlikely that Nepal is going to curb the number of permits they pass out. They make over $4 million a year based on just permits alone. If anything, the numbers are going up each year. They're also driven by the entire industry of Mount Everest and the 8,000-meter peaks, which brings money into all the regions of those mountains for trekking, for the tea houses, and all the people who work in support of the climbing industry. So those numbers are not going to go down. One way for a climber to safeguard him or herself while going on the mountain is, unfortunately, to use some of the more expensive guiding companies. The guiding companies that cost more money happen to have a much lower rate of having clients die on the mountain. Some of those reasons is they more carefully vet the climbers that they allow on the mountain. On the lower end of the scale, there are guiding companies who are there to seize the opportunity to exploit people with less income. So the lower they pay for a climbing expedition, the chances are that they're going to give far less support up the mountain and use high altitude porters or Sherpa without the experience required to guide someone to the summit of Mount Everest. It is those low-budget guiding companies that have the highest number of client deaths. Another way to do it would be to climb in the autumn season, the post-monsoon, into September, but the weather there is much colder and there's a lot more snow, so the difficulty to get to the summit is much greater. And another way to do it, since we've been talking primarily about the Nepal side of the mountain, is to go to the Tibetan side of the mountain, where the number of deaths is much lower. And now there's a reason for that, because the Chinese, or the Tibetan side of the mountain, they carefully vet any guiding company and only let guiding companies that they approve to work on the mountain. And those guiding companies that are approved to climb or guide on the mountain also carefully vet the clients that they let onto their permits. Okay, now this one might seem like the ultimate no-brainer, but one of the ways that anyone could make Everest safer would be to leave one's ego and ambitions in base camp and let the mountain dictate whether to move up or not. And along those same lines, leaving one's ego and driving ambition to get to the top of the mountain, let the crowds go first and take time to let those summit waves come and go. The risk is always there that the summit windows are tapped out and there are no more opportunities to get to the summit. But a case in point is in 2019, our team that was there to search for the remains of Sandy Irvin, granted on the north side of the mountain, we waited in advanced base camp for the main summit waves to come and pass through. And so when we were moving up the mountain on our summit bid, we were literally the only team on the mountain, north or south, had the mountain virtually to ourselves, which is a very unique thing. That took a lot of patience, leaving our ambitions behind, but our foremost thought was safety. So if everybody on Mount Everest used their head and left their ambition and ego at base camp, there'd be a lot less deaths on the mountain. And most importantly, that one's free. "335 people have died on the mountain. What will next year bring? Only time will tell." Everest is the highest mountain in the world. Until that day comes that climbing Mount Everest isn't regarded as one of the greatest individual accomplishments, the people will keep coming. Do a good deed. Don't ask for anything in return. Make the world a better place, one tiny step at a time. Peace be with you, my friends.